What made Russia invade Ukraine? Was it President Putin's vague idea? And most of all, who saw it coming? The Ukraine-Russian crisis has existed for a long time. However, the situation is now popular to the world because of the Russian military attack and the economical consequences. From the millions fleeing Ukraine to the repercussions of the drastic sanctions imposed to Russia. Ukraine had wanted its independence many decades ago. They fought against the Central Powers in World War I and also against the Soviets in 1918. That's when the Ukraine People's Republic was formed, but only to exist just for a few years. Ukraine's history has been smeared by subjugation, mostly by the Russians. The USSR mercilessly subdued the country in 1921. Many people thought the Soviets had united countries coexisting with the same purpose. That was not the case, and Ukraine proved that with blood. In the beginning of the 1930s, Ukraine was devastated, mainly because most farmers were imprisoned or assassinated. Add to the fact that food was confiscated by the Soviets. Ukraine's deep historic wound is called Holodomor, which in Ukraine means death by hunger. This historic moment was so tragic that today, some debate on considering it a genocide. They compare it with the Holocaust, when Nazis killed 6 million Jews, and yet the Soviets killed 10 million Ukrainians. In 1991, Russia recognized Ukraine's sovereignty and independence. The general position of Ukraine is against any left-side political movement. Now even neo-Nazi groups coexist inside Ukraine. How well organized and their exact number is uncertain, but there are reports of hundreds of them meeting up. Ukraine's biggest internal problem is that the country has a population of over 14 million Russian-speaking people, which obviously support Putin. Besides this, Russians are intolerable to any Nazi-like idea. In World War II, the Soviets defeated the Nazis after years of bloody battles. The toll was traumatizing. More than 24 million Russians were killed. After the USSR was disbanded in 1991, Russia had made efforts of peace and cooperation with the West in the following decades. In 1992, the president of the Russian Federation, Boris Yeltsin, spoke before the US Congress showing their efforts of change and openness, and also proposing to continue the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty begun with the USSR. The Russians seriously wanted to be friends with the West. In the year 2000, Putin even asked to be invited to be part of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization created in 1948. He was told that there were no invitations and implicitly that Russia did not matter. Despite the turndown, in the US 9/11 attacks, Putin offered the intelligence and airspace for any mission against bin Laden. Later on, in 2002, he even asked about the possibility of Russia being a member of the European Union. Nonetheless, he was told that Russia was too big. Putin's incredible act of humility turned into the lowest humiliation they could possibly experience. The USSR disintegrated, and NATO, far from that, was expanding. NATO's first expansion occurred in 1999. In 2004, NATO became 26 members, adding 3 former Soviet Union nations. The Russians still remained low, even though they were promised on February 9, 1990, that not an inch of NATO's present military jurisdiction will be spread in an eastern direction. On April 3, 2008, NATO announced that they welcomed Ukraine and Georgia. Russia strongly expressed the impediment on that strategic move. They said that it would have serious consequences. Putin said that he viewed it as a direct threat to the security of their country. In the 1990s, Paul Wolfowitz said that they were going to preserve their NATO alliances even though there was no threat as the USSR was disbanded. He said that the threat was uncertainty. Maintaining NATO and expanding it never had the purpose of threatening Russia. The US had been focused on the region's stability, not against a particular country. The problem is that NATO was born as a military group against the USSR. Militaries are personnel ready to attack and annihilate anything if instructed. They can serve in other ways, but the essence cannot be denied. In 2021, adding to the problem, a British warship navigated in Russia's waters in the Black Sea, which activated their alarm system. It turned away when Russia fired warning shots. The British say that these are Ukrainian waters because Crimea has not been recognized internationally as part of Russia. The Russians warned that next time they would destroy any vessel. More to the problem is that in September 2021, 3 Russian flight fighters escorted out a US bomber B-52H over the Pacific Ocean because it was too close to Russian airspace. These are serious provocations that just drive the Russians away from thinking that NATO is not a threat to them. It has been said that countries request to join NATO as if it was something spontaneous. That is not the case. There has been a plan to promote NATO, and Paul Wolfowitz has promoted it. When George F. Kennan was asked in 1999 what he thought about the expansion of NATO, he replied, "I think it's the beginning of a new Cold War. I think the Russians will gradually react quite adversely, and it will affect their policies. I think it's a mistake. There was no reason for this whatsoever. No one was threatening anybody else. This expansion would make the founding fathers of this country turn over their graves." The Smithsonian Magazine called George F. Kennan the architect of the America's Cold War containment strategy. John Mearsheimer is an American political scientist and international relations scholar. In 2016, during a lecture in the University of Chicago, he said the following.
But I actually think that what's going on here is that the West is leading Ukraine down the primrose path. And the end result is that Ukraine is going to get wrecked. And I believe that the policy that I'm advocating, which is neutralizing Ukraine and then building it up economically and getting it out of the competition between Russia on one side and NATO on the other side, is the best thing that could happen to the Ukrainians.
He saw the war coming, but very unfortunately, no one listened. It is true that Ukraine, due to the history events, has a right to resent the Russians. It is true that they have a preference for the right-wing political parties. It is true that the West has made many mistakes. It is true that NATO should have been disbanded, restructured, or at least changed the name. In any perspective, let it be clear that this does not justify Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Thank you for watching this video. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and share.